first step? What should you do first? So yeah, we'll find the restrictions. Probably should need to do something else to help us do that too, right? What else do we need to do? Make sure we get all the restrictions. Yeah, we need to work on the least common denominator. So to be able to do that, what should I do first? Oh, yeah, so you want to factor this thing, right? Let's factor this thing first. That'll help us out. That's also your first step when you're doing the adding and subtracting, right? To factor that denominators, which is on the quiz here shortly. So I'll remind about that. How does that denominator factor? Good. So what others got for the factoring? Cool. All right. From this now, we should be able to label those restrictions so we keep track of those. Now that we've got everything factored, what numbers are bad to plug in for x? 2 and -1, right? So we don't want x to be 2 and we don't want x to be -1. 2 would make each of those pieces 0, -1 would make each of those pieces 0. So the reason why we keep track of those again is so that when we get to the final answer, when we get to our get done with our solving, we want to throw any of those numbers that we get out. Right? If we get any of those, we want to throw those out. Okay. What's next step now? Yeah, we want to multiply by what in this case? You have the x plus 1 and x minus 2. Good. That's that least common denominator thing, right? When I multiply both sides by the least common denominator. What's next? Good. Yeah, I want to remember, don't just try to cancel here and here, right? Distribute it first and then do your canceling, right? So let's go ahead and just write out the distributing and then we'll worry about the canceling. So I'll have x minus 2 times x plus 1 times the 2x over x minus 2. We'll have x minus 2 times x plus 1 times 3 over x minus 2 times x plus 1. And then I didn't do anything to the right-hand side yet. Let's go through it block by block now. Looking at this first block, if you will, what can we do? Yeah, I got a whole x minus 2 on top and a whole x minus 2 on bottom, right? Those go away. What happens in the second block? Yep, good. The x minus 2s and the x plus 1s go away, all right? And on the right-hand side, just the x plus 1s. Good. That's exactly right. So we're left with, in this first one, we've got 2x times x plus 1. All we're left with in the second part is what? Yeah, so we got minus 3. And then that equals 1 times x minus 2, or just the x minus 2. Now what? Okay, good. Yeah, I probably want to distribute this out, and so we can solve the equation, right? What do you get when you distribute the 2x through? 2x squared plus 2. There's an x, right? Yeah. Yep. Minus the 3 equals x minus 2. What kind of equation do we have? Since we have an x squared, what kind of equation do we call that? Starts with a Q. Quadratic, right? Remember, with quadratic equations, we need to do what with them before we try to solve them? Set it to 0, right? We want to set it equal to 0 and factor. Okay. So subtract your x to both sides and add 2 to both sides. So subtract x from both sides, add 2 to both sides. What do you end up with? 2x squared minus x. Yeah, minus 1. Oh, it should be plus x. Yep, thank you. Because we had plus 2x and minus 1x, so it should be a plus x. And now what's our big strategy for solving, or solving this type of equation? We're going to do the left-hand side. Yeah, we do AC, which would just be -2, right? And in fact, there's a -2 that add up to +1. What would you use? +2 and -1, which is basically what we already had to start with before we simplified it. So we can factor a 2x out of the first 2 terms. Leaves you with x plus 1. What do we factor out of the second 2 terms? Yeah, it was plus x minus 1 to start with, yes. Yeah. So what do we want to factor out of the second 2 terms here? -1. Yeah, you need to factor out a -1, so it makes it x plus 1, right? And so we have, well, how does that factor now? Good. So we have x plus 1 times 2x minus 1 equals 0. We're running out of room. What do we do with that now? Yep, set both of them equal to 0. So the first one will give you x is -1. What does the second one give you? 1/2. Good. So notice the whole goal of clearing your denominators, multiplying both sides by your least common denominator, is to get this to look like an equation that you've solved before. It's quadratic, right? We've solved quadratics by factoring. There's only one extra step now that we need to do to finish this off. Yeah, right.
Oh, sorry. I think that's what you're going to
say. Yeah, you're right. So what is it we're going to do? You're exactly right.
It can't equal -1.
Good. Yeah, we need to make sure that we don't have any restrictions in our list of answers, right? Are either of those restricted values? Yeah. Yeah, the -1 is a restricted value, right? So that needs to go away. And our only answer is this one. Okay, so this one is restricted. So we cross it out. What questions do you have on that one? Process is exactly the same every single time on these, right? Start the problem, and this is exactly what we've done this entire chapter. What was the first step in any problem we've done? Factor everything, right? Literally the first step in every single problem we've done this entire chapter is factor, right? Same thing is true when you're trying to solve these types of equations. Factor, okay? In particular, factor those denominators, because we're trying to find the least common denominator, which is exactly what we were doing for adding and subtracting, right? Same concept. Any questions on that one at all? All right, so just to remind again, we've got test on Wednesday, right? Okay. So on Monday, I'll have an in-class review for you to work on. There will also be a second review also on Moodle as well that you can work on outside of class. Ready for your quiz? No? Well, let's go ahead and do the quiz. Like I mentioned before,